Hello guys! Today we are going to study the application of DC motors in automobiles. In order to improve the comfort, convenience, and safety of automobiles, modern automobiles commonly use DC motors to achieve automatic window lifting. DC motors are not only applied in the electric window system, it is also widely distributed in the automobile in the engine chassis body and accessories to serve as a drive. First of all, let's go over DC motors for car starters. Excitation DC motors are typically used in automobiles as DC motors for car starters. The car starter, commonly known as the motor, is the main component of the starting system. When we turn the ignition switch to the start position, the motor generates a rotary lift to start turning. At the same time, the solenoid switch exits the pinion gear in the drive mechanism so that it pinches against the engine's flywheel gear ring. In this way, the rotation of the motor is transferred to the flywheel through the transmission mechanism, causing the engine to start. It consists of three parts: a series-excited DC motor, a transmission mechanism, and an electromagnetic switch, also known as a control device. Today, we are going to learn about DC motors for car starters. This DC motor is mainly composed of armature assembly, magnetic stage housing, electric brushes, brush holders, and so on. Now let's examine its structure. The armature assembly is the rotating part of the motor and consists of the current core, commutator, windings, and armature shaft. In this, the armature core consists of a number of thin silicon steel sheets with grooves in the outer circle laminated together. The commutator is designed to automatically change the direction of the current in the coil when the rotor winding is rotated past the current balance position. The commutator consists of a commutator plate and an insulating part embedded in a shaft sleeve. The armature shaft delivers mechanical energy to the outside and supports the commutator, rotor core, end caps, bearings, and other components. The windings are mounted in slots at the edge of the outer diameter of the stack, and the winding turns are connected to the copper plates of the commutator respectively. Winding mounted on armature shaft. Electric brushes made of pressed copper and graphite. There are usually 4 brush holders, generally of frame construction. 2 of the connected excitation and armature windings are insulated from the housing, called insulated brushes. The other 2 brush holders are directly connected to the housing to form an electrical circuit called a grounding brush. Both brushes and housing are insulated. The electric brushes maintain the proper pressure against the commutator by means of brush springs, which are used to connect the circuit of the excitation winding so that the current is introduced into the excitation winding. The role of the excitation winding is to produce magnetic excitation and serve as the mechanical support of the motor. Mainly consists of stator core, excitation winding, base, and so on. The excitation winding is fixed inside the starter housing. The excitation winding is connected to the armature winding in the following 4 ways. Separately, excitation. The excitation winding and the armature winding are powered by different DC sources and are not connected to each other. Parallel excitation. The excitation winding is connected in parallel with the armature winding. Series excitation. The excitation winding is in series with the armature winding. Multiplex excitation. The excitation winding is divided into two parts. One part is connected in parallel with the armature winding, called shunt winding. One part is connected in series with the armature winding, called series winding. The excitation winding of a DC motor for a car starter is connected in series. The current flows through the excitation winding via the terminal, through the connection of commutator and brushes. The current flows through the insulated brushes, the positive brushes, into the armature winding, and finally through the grounding brushes and the negative brushes to the ground. Okay, in closing, let's take a look at the housings and end caps. The housing part is made of rolled low carbon steel or cast iron. The end caps have front and rear. The front end cap is pressed from sheet steel, and the rear end cap is cast from gray cast iron in the shape of a notched cup. Additionally, how are DC motors used in other automotive appliances? The most typical is the permanent magnet DC motor. Permanent magnets replace the excitation winding. Neodymium magnet is currently the best permanent magnet material. Its magnetic properties are very strong, and it is mostly used as the magnetic pole in permanent magnet motors. It is typically used in automobiles for electric door lock motors, wiper motors, and electric window motors. In this lesson, we have studied how DC motors work for car starters, and how permanent magnet DC motors are used in automobiles. A hard work, a harvest. This may not necessarily be, but you will get what you put in. That's for sure. See you guys!